The storm hammered the highway with sheets of rain so thick that Derek Watson could barely see 10 feet ahead. His windshield wipers worked frantically, but it wasn't enough. Lightning cracked across the dark sky, illuminating the empty road for just a moment before plunging everything back into darkness. Derek was tired. He had just closed a major business deal in Boston and was driving back to New York. All he wanted was to reach his hotel, take a hot shower, and sleep. But the storm had other plans. Hello family, welcome back. Please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It truly means a lot to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. So sit back and relax as we dive into the story. As he rounded a bend, his headlights caught something unusual. An old car sat tilted on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking weakly. Two figures stood beside it, hunched against the rain. Derek's first instinct was to keep driving. He had heard too many stories about roadside traps and robberies. But something made him slow down. Through the rain-streaked window he saw them more clearly now. An elderly man and woman, both soaked to the bone, waving their arms desperately. The woman clutched a shawl around her shoulders. The man leaned heavily on a cane, his other hand shielding his face from the wind. Derek pulled over and rolled down his window halfway. "Are you folks okay?" The old man stepped forward, rain pouring off his worn hat. "Our car broke down, son. We've been stuck here for over an hour. No one will stop." Derek hesitated. His business instincts screamed at him to be careful. But then he looked at the woman. She was shivering violently, her lips almost blue. These weren't criminals. They were grandparents, probably someone's beloved family. "Get in," Derek said, unlocking the doors. "I'll take you somewhere safe." The couple climbed into the back seat, dripping water everywhere. Derek turned up the heat and handed them a blanket from his emergency kit. "I'm Derek. What are your names?" "I'm Thomas," the old man said, his voice rough but grateful. "This is my wife, Eleanor." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. "We thought no one would help us." Derek pulled back onto the highway. "Where were you headed?" Thomas hesitated, exchanging a glance with his wife. "We were trying to get to our grandson's house. But our car gave out." As they drove, Derek noticed something odd. Through the rearview mirror, he saw Thomas holding Eleanor's hand tightly, almost protectively. There was fear in their eyes. Not just from the storm. "Is everything all right?" Derek asked carefully. Eleanor's voice cracked. "We're running away from our son." Derek's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Running away? From their own child? What kind of danger were these elderly people in? Derek pulled into a small diner off the highway. The neon sign flickered through the rain, casting red and blue shadows across the parking lot. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. Only two other customers sat at the counter, barely looking up as they entered. Derek guided Thomas and Eleanor to a booth in the corner. A waitress brought hot coffee and towels. Eleanor's hands shook as she wrapped them around the warm mug. Thomas stared at the table, his jaw tight with worry. "You don't have to tell me anything," Derek said gently. "But if you're in danger, maybe I can help." Thomas looked at his wife. Eleanor nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes again. The old man took a deep breath. "Our son's name is Marcus," Thomas began. "We haven't seen him in 20 years. He left when he was young, angry about things we couldn't control. We tried to reach him, but he refused every call, every letter. Then 3 weeks ago," Eleanor continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "our grandson showed up at our door. His name is Benjamin. We didn't even know he existed." Derek leaned forward. "Your grandson found you?" "Yes," Thomas said. "Benjamin told us his father, Marcus, had never spoken about us. But Benjamin always felt something was missing. He searched for years and finally found our address. When he knocked on our door, it was like a miracle." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "He's such a wonderful young man. Kind, respectful, full of life. He stayed with us for 2 weeks. We talked about everything. We finally had family again. But then Marcus found out," Thomas said darkly. "He showed up at our house 3 days ago. He was furious. He accused Benjamin of betraying him. And then he told us why he really came." Derek felt a chill that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. What did he want? Thomas's voice turned bitter. "Our land. We own $20 million worth of property. It's been in our family for generations, passed down from my grandmother. Marcus wants it all. He said we're too old to manage our own affairs," Eleanor added, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "He's trying to have us declared incompetent. He has doctors willing to lie, reports already written. He showed us court papers. Everything was already prepared. Derek sat back, stunned. That's fraud. That's illegal. We know, Thomas said. But Marcus has money now. He has lawyers. He told us that if we fight him, he'll make sure we end up in a nursing home, locked away where no one can reach us. He said we'd never see Benjamin again. Eleanor grabbed Derek's hand across the table. So we ran. We took what we could carry and left in the middle of the night. We were heading to Benjamin's apartment in Philadelphia. But our car broke down and we thought it was over. We thought Marcus would find us. Derek's mind raced. He had built his fortune through hard work and honest business. But he had also seen the dark side of wealth, the way greed could destroy families. These people needed more than a ride. They needed protection. Do you have any proof? Derek asked. Any documents, evidence of what Marcus is planning? Thomas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. We have copies of everything. The fake medical reports, the court orders, even text messages between Marcus and his lawyers. Derek took the envelope and looked inside. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was a criminal conspiracy. And if Marcus was willing to go this far, these elderly people were in real danger. What kind of son would destroy his own parents for money? Derek made a decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. I have a friend who can help. His name is Richard Palmer. He's one of the best lawyers in New York. Thomas shook his head. We can't afford a lawyer like that. You're not paying, Derek said firmly. I am. Within an hour, Richard arrived at the diner. He was a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Derek had known him for 15 years, and Richard had never lost a case that mattered. Richard sat down and studied the documents Thomas had brought. His expression grew darker with each page. Finally he looked up. This is worse than fraud. This is elder abuse, conspiracy, and attempted theft. Marcus has bribed at least 3 doctors and falsified multiple medical evaluations. If we can prove this in court, he'll go to prison. Can you stop him? Eleanor asked desperately. Yes, Richard said. But we need to move fast. According to these papers, Marcus has a court hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. He's planning to have you both declared incompetent and assign himself as your legal guardian. Once that happens, he'll control everything. Derek felt anger rising in his chest. How do we stop it? Richard pulled out his laptop. We file an emergency injunction tonight. We present this evidence to a judge and get the hearing postponed. Then we investigate everyone involved, every doctor, every official Marcus bribed. We build a case so strong that he can't wiggle out of it. Thomas looked at Derek with tears in his eyes. Why are you doing this for us? You don't even know us. Derek thought about his own grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died. She had taught him that wealth meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. Richard worked through the night, making calls and filing papers. By morning, he had secured an emergency court appearance. Derek drove Thomas and Eleanor to the courthouse in Philadelphia. Benjamin met them there, his face filled with relief when he saw his grandparents safe. Benjamin was a young man in his 20s with his grandmother's gentle eyes and his grandfather's strong jaw. He hugged them both tightly. I was so worried. When you disappeared, I thought Marcus had already taken you. This young man saved us, Thomas said, gesturing to Derek. We wouldn't be here without him. Inside the courtroom, Marcus was already waiting with his lawyers. He was a man in his 50s, well-dressed and confident. When he saw his parents walk in with Richard Palmer beside them, his face turned white. What is this? Marcus demanded. They're not supposed to be here. They're mentally unfit. Richard stepped forward. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Marcus Chen has engaged in a massive fraud to steal his parents' inheritance. We request an immediate investigation. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Catherine Morrison, reviewed the documents Richard presented. Her expression grew colder with each page. Finally, she looked at Marcus. Mr. Chen, these are very serious accusations. Falsifying medical records, bribing officials, conspiracy to commit fraud. Do you have anything to say? Marcus's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, these documents are fake. My client has been trying to help his elderly parents, who clearly cannot care for themselves. Then explain this, Richard said, projecting a text message on the courtroom screen. It was from Marcus to one of the doctors. Make sure the evaluation shows severe dementia. I'll pay you $50,000 when the court awards me guardianship. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's face turned red. His lawyer sat down, defeated. Judge Morrison slammed her gavel. Mr. Chin, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Bailiff, take him into custody. As police officers handcuffed Marcus, he looked at his parents with pure hatred. You'll regret this. That land should be mine. You're just selfish old fools who don't know what's good for you. Eleanor stood up, her voice strong despite her age. We raised you better than this, Marcus. We taught you about love and family. But you chose greed instead. Marcus was led away, still shouting threats. Benjamin put his arms around his grandparents and Thomas broke down crying. After 20 years of heartbreak, justice had finally been served. But as they left the courthouse, Derek noticed a man in a dark suit watching them from across the street. The man made a phone call, his eyes never leaving Thomas and Eleanor. Derek's instincts, honed by years in business, screamed a warning. This wasn't over yet. 2 weeks passed quietly. Thomas and Eleanor stayed at Benjamin's apartment while Richard worked to finalize their case. Derek visited them often, bringing groceries and checking on their safety. The couple reminded him so much of his grandmother that he couldn't stay away. One evening, Derek arrived to find Benjamin pacing nervously. Someone's been watching the building, Benjamin said. A black car parks across the street every night. Different drivers, but always the same car. Derek's jaw tightened. He had noticed it too. Marcus is in jail. Who else would be following you? Marcus had business partners, Thomas said quietly. Men who helped him plan this. They want the land too. Before Derek could respond, someone knocked loudly on the door. Benjamin looked through the peephole and gasped. It's the police. Derek opened the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway with a man in an expensive suit. The man smiled, but his eyes were cold. I'm Gerald Foster, attorney for the Chin family estate. I have a court order to take Thomas and Eleanor Chin into protective custody. On what grounds? Derek demanded. Gerald held up official-looking papers. Judge Harrison has determined that these elderly individuals require immediate care. They're to be transferred to a state facility pending a full evaluation. Richard arrived within minutes, but when he reviewed the papers, his face went pale. These are legitimate. Judge Harrison signed them this morning. Harrison? Derek said. I thought Judge Morrison was handling this case. She was, Richard said grimly. But someone petitioned for a different judge. Harrison has a reputation for being, shall we say, flexible with his rulings. Eleanor grabbed Thomas's hand. They're going to lock us away. Derek stepped between the officers and the elderly couple. You're not taking them anywhere until we verify this with Judge Morrison. Gerald's smile disappeared. If you interfere with a court order, Mr. Watson, you'll be arrested for obstruction. The officers moved forward. Derek's mind raced. He pulled out his phone and called someone he had hoped never to disturb. His old college roommate, Senator William Hayes, owed him several favors. Will, Derek said urgently. I need your help right now. Within 20 minutes, Senator Hayes had made 3 calls. The officers received a message on their radios and stepped back, confused. Gerald's phone rang. His face turned red as he listened. When he hung up, he glared at Derek with pure hatred. This isn't over, Gerald hissed. That land belongs to the Chin family business. You're just delaying the inevitable. After they left, Richard collapsed into a chair. Derek, we need to understand something. This isn't just about Marcus anymore. There are powerful people who want that land. They're willing to bend the law to get it. Why? Benjamin asked. It's just empty land outside the city. Thomas shook his head. It's not empty. My grandmother left specific instructions about that land. It can only be inherited by family members who live a life of service to others. She wrote it in her will. Derek leaned forward. What kind of service? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. My grandmother-in-law Helen believed wealth should help people. She said the land could only go to descendants who spent their lives helping others. Thomas and I have spent 50 years running a charity. We've helped hundreds of families, built schools, fed the hungry. We've given almost everything we had. Marcus knows this, Thomas continued. That's why he tried to have us declared incompetent. If we can't manage our own affairs, the will becomes invalid. The land would go to the next heir, which is him. Richard stood up suddenly. Where is this will? The original document. Thomas's face went white. In our house. In a safe in the basement. We need to get it, Derek said. Now. They drove through the night to Thomas and Eleanor's small farmhouse on the edge of Philadelphia. The house was dark and silent. As they approached, Derek noticed the front door was slightly open. Stay in the car, he told Eleanor and Thomas. Derek, Richard, and Benjamin entered carefully. The house had been ransacked. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied, papers scattered everywhere. They rushed to the basement. The safe door hung open, twisted and broken. The will was gone. Benjamin punched the wall in frustration. Marcus took it. Even from jail, he found a way. Thomas sank to the floor, all hope draining from his face. Without that will, we have nothing. The court will give everything to Marcus. But Eleanor wasn't crying. She was smiling. Thomas, do you remember what we did 15 years ago? After the house fire? Thomas looked up slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. The lawyer. We made copies. What copies? Derek asked. Eleanor's smile widened. Our lawyer made notarized photocopies of the will and kept them in his office safe. He insisted on it after we lost important papers in a small fire. The copies have the same legal weight as the original. Richard grabbed his phone. What's the lawyer's name? Harold Bennett, Thomas said. He's retired now, but he lives in Boston. Derek was already heading for the door. Then we're going to Boston. Right now. As they drove away from the farmhouse, Derek saw the black car again in his rearview mirror. It followed them onto the highway, staying exactly 3 cars behind. Whoever wanted that land wasn't giving up. And Derek knew that before this was over, someone might get hurt. But could they reach Boston before Marcus's people stopped them? They drove through the night, taking back roads to avoid the black car. Derek kept checking his mirrors, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Benjamin sat in the back with his grandparents, watching for any signs of trouble. At dawn, they reached Harold Bennett's house in a quiet Boston neighborhood. The old lawyer answered the door in his bathrobe, surprised to see visitors so early. When he saw Thomas and Eleanor, his weathered face broke into a smile. Thomas? Eleanor? I haven't seen you in years, Harold said, ushering them inside. What brings you here at this hour? Thomas explained everything. Marcus's plot, the stolen will, the corrupt judges and lawyers. Harold's smile faded, replaced by anger. That boy never understood what his grandmother wanted. Helen would be heartbroken. Do you still have the copies? Eleanor asked desperately. Harold nodded. Of course. I never throw away important documents. He led them to his study and opened an old filing cabinet. He pulled out a thick envelope marked with Thomas and Eleanor's names. Inside were perfectly preserved photocopies of the will, each page stamped and notarized. Richard examined the documents carefully. These are perfect. They'll hold up in any court. But as they prepared to leave, Derek's phone rang. It was Senator Hayes. Derek, you need to be careful. I've been making inquiries about this case. The people behind Marcus are connected to a major development company called Westfield Corporation. They want that land to build a shopping complex. They've already invested millions in planning. How much influence do they have? Derek asked. Enough to buy judges, the senator said grimly. I've called in every favor I have to protect you, but my reach only goes so far. Get that will to Judge Morrison directly. Don't trust anyone else. They left Harold's house and headed back to Philadelphia. But halfway there, Derek noticed something wrong. The black car wasn't following them anymore. Instead, there were 3 cars boxing them in on the highway. Derek, Benjamin said urgently. We have company. The cars forced Derek toward an exit ramp. He had no choice but to take it. They ended up on a deserted industrial road surrounded by old warehouses. The 3 cars blocked them from behind. Men in suits stepped out, led by Gerald Foster, the lawyer from before. Gerald walked up to Derek's window. Mr. Watson, you've been very difficult. Hand over those documents and everyone can go home safely. Derek stepped out of the car, placing himself between Gerald and his passengers. Those documents belong to Thomas and Eleanor. You have no right to them. Gerald's cold smile returned. Rights don't matter here. Only results. Westfield Corporation has invested too much to let 2 old people stand in their way. Those documents now. You're confessing to conspiracy and intimidation, Richard said, holding up his phone. I'm recording everything. One of Gerald's men grabbed the phone and smashed it on the ground. No one is recording anything. Eleanor suddenly stepped out of the car, her frail body shaking but her voice strong. You can threaten us all you want. You can steal, bribe, and lie. But that land was meant to help people, not make corporations rich. My grandmother-in-law died protecting that mission. I won't let you destroy it. Gerald laughed. You're a dying old woman. What can you possibly do? She's not alone, a voice called out. Everyone turned. Police cars surrounded the area, lights flashing. Judge Morrison stepped out of one vehicle, accompanied by federal agents. Behind them came people Derek had never seen before, dozens of them, ordinary families holding signs. One woman stepped forward. "Eleanor and Thomas helped my family when we had nowhere to go. They gave us a home, food, and hope. We won't let anyone hurt them." Another man spoke up. "They paid for my daughter's surgery when we couldn't afford it. They never asked for anything in return." More voices joined in, each sharing stories of how Thomas and Eleanor had changed their lives. Derek realized these were the families the couple had helped over 50 years of service. They had come to protect the people who had protected them. Judge Morrison walked up to Gerald. "Mr. Foster, you and your associates are under arrest for conspiracy, intimidation, and attempted theft. We've been investigating Westfield Corporation for months. Your little confession just now gave us everything we needed." Federal agents handcuffed Gerald and his men. Gerald's face twisted with rage. "You can't do this. We have rights. We have connections." "You have the right to remain silent," an agent said, leading him away. Judge Morrison turned to Thomas and Eleanor. "I've reviewed the notarized copies of your grandmother's will. They're legally valid. The land is yours as it should have been all along." Thomas and Eleanor held each other, tears streaming down their faces. Benjamin wrapped his arms around them both. The families they had helped cheered and clapped. But Derek noticed Eleanor swaying slightly. He caught her just as her knees buckled. "Eleanor?" "I'm all right," she whispered, but her face was pale. "Just tired." Thomas's expression filled with worry. Derek knew that look. He had seen it on his grandmother's face before she died. Eleanor was sick, sicker than she was letting on. They had won the battle for their land, but time was running out. What would Thomas and Eleanor do with their inheritance before it was too late? 3 months later, Eleanor sat in a hospital bed, surrounded by flowers and photographs. The doctors had confirmed what everyone feared. She had a terminal illness and the treatments were no longer working. But instead of sadness, her face glowed with purpose. Thomas sat beside her, holding her hand. Derek, Benjamin, and Richard stood nearby. Spread across the bed were architectural drawings and plans. "We're calling it Hope Village," Eleanor said, her voice weak but determined. "The land will become a community for families who have nowhere else to go. Homes, schools, a hospital, gardens where people can grow their own food. Everything they need to build new lives." Benjamin had spent weeks designing the village. He had dropped out of his architecture program temporarily to focus entirely on this project. "Grandmother, look at this section. We can house 200 families in the first phase. And there's space for a medical clinic." Derek had committed $5 million of his own money to help build the village. "I've contacted builders and suppliers. Everyone wants to help. Some are offering materials at cost. Others are volunteering their labor." Thomas looked at his wife with infinite love. "Are you sure this is what you want? We could sell the land, make sure you get the best medical care anywhere in the world." Eleanor shook her head. "The best care won't save me, my love. But this will save hundreds of others. This is what your grandmother Helen wanted. This is what we've worked toward our whole lives." News of Hope Village spread quickly. The families Thomas and Eleanor had helped over the years came forward to volunteer. Dr. Sarah Chin, whose medical school tuition they had paid 20 years ago, agreed to run the clinic. Teachers they had supported offered to staff the school. It became a movement of gratitude and love. Even Marcus, sitting in his prison cell, heard about the village. One day he asked to see his parents. Thomas wanted to refuse, but Eleanor insisted they go. In the prison visiting room, Marcus looked broken. The confident, greedy man from the courtroom was gone. In his place sat someone filled with shame. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Marcus said, unable to meet their eyes. "I tried to destroy you for money. I spent 20 years hating you for things that were my own fault. I was angry that you gave so much away instead of keeping it for me. I didn't understand." Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand. "We forgive you, Marcus. We never stopped loving you even when you hurt us." Marcus broke down crying. "How can you forgive me after everything I did?" Thomas's voice was gentle. "Because love isn't about what people deserve. It's about what we choose to give even when it's hard. You're our son. That never changed." "When I get out," Marcus said through his tears, "I want to help with the village. I want to learn what real wealth means. I want to be someone you can be proud of." Eleanor smiled. "We're already proud that you're trying." 1 year later, Hope Village opened its gates. 200 families moved into new homes. Children played in safe playgrounds. The medical clinic treated patients free of charge. Gardens bloomed with vegetables and flowers. Derek had invested more money to add a community center and library. Marcus, released early for good behavior, worked as the village coordinator. He organized activities, helped families settle in, and made sure everyone had what they needed. The families were cautious around him at first, but his genuine dedication slowly won their trust. Benjamin had finished his architecture degree and was already designing phase 2 of the village. Dr. Sarah Chen's clinic had treated over 1,000 patients. The teachers reported that children were thriving. On opening day, hundreds gathered for the celebration. Thomas stood at the podium, his hair whiter now, his steps slower, but his spirit unbroken. Eleanor sat in a wheelchair beside him, wrapped in blankets, her great-grandson sleeping peacefully in her arms. Marcus approached the microphone, his voice shaking with emotion. "I spent most of my life thinking my parents were foolish for giving everything away. I thought wealth was measured in money and property. But standing here today, seeing what they built, I finally understand. My parents are the richest people in our family. Rich in love, rich in purpose, rich in the lives they've touched." The crowd applauded. Thomas helped Eleanor to her feet, and together they cut the ribbon, officially opening Hope Village. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Eleanor sat quietly watching children play. Derek sat beside her, Benjamin on her other side, with Marcus standing behind them, his hand on his father's shoulder. Eleanor looked at the village that bore the spirit of everything she and Thomas had believed in. She looked at her grandson, her son who had found his way back, and the young man who had stopped in a storm to help 2 strangers. She held her great-grandson closer and whispered words that everyone nearby heard, words that would be carved into a stone at the village entrance. "Love is the only wealth that matters." Eleanor closed her eyes peacefully, surrounded by family and the legacy that would live on long after she was gone. Thomas kissed her forehead gently, tears streaming down his face, knowing that their mission was complete. They had turned their inheritance into hope, their pain into purpose, and their love into a home for hundreds who needed it most. Hope Village stood as a testament to a simple truth. The greatest fortune anyone can leave behind isn't measured in money, but in the lives touched, the hope restored, and the love shared freely with the world. We've come to the end of today's story. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe for more powerful and inspiring stories. See you in the next one.